and thank you for joining us today. My name is Elizabeth Shearer, and I'm the Network Coordinator at ClimateWest. I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. This is the final webinar of a three-part series which aims to take you through the climate adaptation journey using free tools and resources developed under the Manitoba Climate Resilience Training program. The recordings for all three of these webinars in the series will be hosted on the ClimateWest website. And we're pleased to be able to offer this training as a collaboration between the Government of Manitoba and ClimateWest. As we begin today's webinar in a good way, I want to acknowledge that ClimateWest's work occurs on the traditional land of many Indigenous nations and covers the territories of Treaties 1 through 8 and 10. The ClimateWest office is based on Treaty 1, the traditional ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Innuit, Anishinawag, Dakota, Dene, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. I'd also like to acknowledge Treaty 3, specifically the Shoal Lake 40 area, where we get our water supply here in Winnipeg, and the Nelson River. Treaty 5, which supplies 70% of Manitobans with their electricity. At ClimateWest, we respect and honor the treaties and Indigenous ways of knowing and being. We're committed to the ongoing work of truth and reconciliation and exploring ways to respectfully weave these knowledges into our climate adaptation work. We encourage you to take time and learn about and reflect on the Indigenous lands where you live, work, and play, and consider what actions you can take towards reconciliation. My colleague Brooke just shared in the chat the link to native-land.ca. And to get to know you a bit better, I'd like to invite everyone on the webinar now to please share in the chat your name, the organization you're joining on behalf of or affiliated with, and what Indigenous lands you're on today. We've included the link, and you can explore to find out a bit more on whose land you are on if you don't know that already. So feel free to type in the chat and introduce yourself now. I look forward to seeing where everyone's joining us from across the province and beyond. So just share your name, organization, and what lands you're joining from. Now, a quick overview of what we'll be covering today. I will start with a brief introduction of who ClimateWest is as your regional climate service provider and host of this webinar series. Then I'll hand it over to the Manitoba Department of Environment and Climate Change, Climate Action, and Energy Innovation Division, who will be delivering the training today on climate adaptation planning. We've set aside approximately 10 minutes at the end for questions. So if any questions come to mind at any time throughout the webinar, please feel free to type them in using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your Zoom panel. So you should be able to see a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. And I encourage you to use that feature and not the chat, just so we'll actually be able to see all of the questions. Who is ClimateWest? We are a nonprofit organization that provides free and reliable climate services across the Prairie region. We're supported by the Manitoba government, the Alberta government, Saskatchewan government, and at the federal level by Environment and Climate Change Canada. We're part of a national network of regional climate service providers that work in partnership with the Canadian Centre for Climate Services. We help Canadians adapt to our change and changing climate. Our vision is to see communities, businesses, nonprofits, and governments be equipped to thrive in the face of a changing climate and make decisions based on the best science, expertise, and training that's tailored to meet their unique needs. So what do we do at ClimateWest? We are driven by a shared belief and commitment to collaboration and inclusive decision-making in climate resilience building. On the screen, you'll see some words that describe what we do. For example, as collaborators, we can help you find local climate data, understand its implications, and provide guidance on how to integrate climate data into your decision-making. And as a translator, we take complex ideas like scientific data, research, and reports and make them as accessible and applicable as possible for a variety of audiences. As well as through amplifying, we share climate information and resources that are reliable, credible, and relevant to you and your region. If you're ever stuck on how to integrate climate adaptation into your work, we host and promote a wide variety of training, tools, and resources on our website. A small selection of resources are displayed on this slide, but I encourage you to browse around our website after today's webinar. Lastly, I'll invite you to scan the QR code on the screen and stay informed about the latest resources, events, and trainings that can help you advance climate resilience in your community through our monthly newsletter. So go ahead and you can scan that QR code and sign up to stay in the loop. We also have a free help desk, so please feel free to pick up the phone or shoot us an email to reach out with us. Reach out to us with any of your questions, big or small. Next, I have the pleasure of handing it over to the Government of Manitoba. Alexandra Bourne and Ramon Salas join us today in their role as Senior Policy Analysts with the Manitoba Department of Environment and Climate Change, Climate Action, and Energy Innovation Division. Thank you both for being here today. Take it away.
Good morning. My name is Alex Bourne. I hope you can see me on the screen at the moment. And I am going to begin the webinar, and then I'm going to pass it on to my colleague, Ramon. Next slide, please. So here's an outline of the webinar that we're going to do today. This is the third webinar in the series that we've done to date. We're going to do a recap of the first two webinars of the key takeaways. We're going to get into Manitoba's climate adaptation planning process and guiding principles. We'll take you to the third stage of the adaptation planning cycle, which is adaptation planning, the fourth stage, which is implementation, and the fifth stage, which is monitoring, evaluation, and learning. Again, we're going to be referring to the climate adaptation workbook, which you can see on the slide at the moment, and the guidebook, and also the workbook with the associated worksheets. And these documents are available on the ClimateWest website. Next slide, please. So to recap the webinar that you attended 2 weeks ago on Climate Preparedness 101, just to have this fresh in your mind while we're going through this webinar. Human activities are increasing greenhouse gases in the Earth's atmosphere and are driving temperature rise. Models have demonstrated that Canada's climate has changed because of global temperature increase, impacting all regions and providing opportunities. We have and will continue to experience increased frequency and severity of climate events. The climate will stabilize, though, once we achieve and maintain net zero global greenhouse gas emissions. We will not revert to past climate conditions, and we will have to adapt to our new reality. Inaction is more costly than taking action. The Climate Risk Institute states that for every dollar invested, you save $5 in future costs. So this is a very good return on investment. It is important to consider climate change risks and opportunities in your decision making. There are many climate services out there that are available in Manitoba, across the prairies, and throughout Canada to support climate smart decision making and resilient infrastructure design. So being prepared for a changing climate helps to build resilience for our safe and healthy and prosperous Manitoba. Next slide, please. As you will remember, the second webinar, we focused on vulnerability and risk assessment, and we went through the vulnerability and risk assessment guidebook and the associated worksheets. And from that, the key takeaways from the webinar can be summarized as effective vulnerability risk assessment requires the engagement of diverse stakeholders, including local communities, government agencies, Indigenous, private, and other sectors to incorporate various perspectives. A structured approach helps examine the cause and effect relationship between climate hazard, impacts, and consequences, fostering a comprehensive and effective risk management process. Assessing climate risks involves evaluating the likelihood and severity of the climate hazards and the impacts consequences that will occur on varied sectors, which will prioritize actions to mitigate these risks. I hope you remember seeing the risk matrix that we showed you, which was a heat map with red up in the top right-hand corner and the yellow in the middle and sort of green at the bottom, which is your risk assessment matrix. A VRA is an evidence-based, data-driven report verifying that you are considering climate change in your planning and decision-making. And to summarize, understanding your vulnerability and risk helps to build resilience for a safe, healthy, and prosperous Manitoba. Next slide. As you can see, you've seen this slide before. This is our Manitoba Climate Resilience Training progress over the years. And we are in this yellow area at the moment for 2024 and onwards, where we're talking about adaptation planning, which is what we're going to talk about today. Next slide. Again, these are Manitoba's Climate Adaptation Planning Guidebooks. We have the Vulnerability and Risk Assessment Guidebook, the How to Use the Climate Atlas Guidebook, the Adaptation Guidebook, and associated workbook. These are all available on the ClimateWest website for you to look at. And we're going to work through some of these worksheets today. Next slide, please. Manitoba's climate adaptation planning process. You've seen this diagram before. It's a circular, iterative process. And through this webinar, we're going to be starting here at adaptation planning. So to create a plan to address your climate risks in order of priority. Next slide, please. So why make a climate adaptation plan? Question that your community might be asking you, your council members, other people in your community. Well, it's going to help the community identify actions to reduce their vulnerabilities to a changing climate. It can reduce health risks caused by climate change, such as heat waves, vector-borne diseases, and water contamination. It creates a path to implement actions efficiently and in a timely manner. It minimizes economic damage and losses from climate hazards, and it makes your community more attractive for people and investment, ensuring sustainable economic prosperity. An adaptation plan would also help to protect all assets, whether natural ecosystems, clean air, water, or built infrastructure, and reduces maintenance costs in the long term. Next slide, please. So let's get started on adaptation planning. So the purpose of this is to create a list of adaptation actions that'll help reduce your community's vulnerability to risks and increase your resilience to the impacts of climate change. You can see here in adaptation planning, it's a three-step approach. The first one being identify your potential adaptation options. The second is to evaluate these options. And then the third is to prepare the plan. We also have a checklist here, which lists the associated worksheets that are available in the workbook that we've been referring to. Next slide, please. As you go through this, we do have some guiding principles that will help you as you develop your adaptation plan. You want to be transparent. The process of your planning should be, and outcomes should be accessible, well documented, and shared with your community. The planning should be inclusive. You want to ensure that all community groups, including marginalized or vulnerable populations, are considered and involved in your climate action and decision making. Especially, we would like to ensure that you have and foster your meaningful engagement with the Indigenous communities around your municipality. The planning process should be equitable, ensuring fair treatment among community members, especially marginalized or vulnerable groups, and sharing in the benefits and burdens of climate action. Next slide. The planning process is iterative. You're going to be regularly updating your adaptation plan and incorporating new knowledge, lessons learned, and changes within your community. You need to be well informed as you're developing your adaptation plan. You want to draw on the best available scientific information as well as local and Indigenous knowledge. And the last guiding principle is that your plan should be integrated. It should be aligned with existing plans, decision-making process to maximize your community benefit and reduce potential duplication at the municipal level. We don't want you having to develop a brand new plan. We want you to be integrating this into your existing plans and also into your existing policy cycles, budget cycles, and planning cycles for your community. Next slide, please. Stakeholder engagement. Stakeholder engagement is key to developing an adaptation plan. You need to engage and collaborate with key stakeholders such as watershed authorities, businesses, Indigenous communities, your community, and the number of service organizations that are available in your community. An inclusive engagement will lead to a more meaningful and adaptation process. The benefits of stakeholder engagement are improved decision-making, improved communication. You'll get increased understanding and buy-in if you're out there engaging from the beginning of the process, talking about climate with your community and talking about the possible actions that you might want to take in terms of adaptation. The greater understanding that you have in your community, the greater support you will have for the actions that you want to develop. Next slide, please. So considerations for starting an adaptation plan. Really what we can say is just get started. Not everyone's planning process is the same. Not everyone's adaptation plan is going to be the same. Some are going to be more comprehensive than others, but the most important thing is to just get started. Look for leadership support by your council, community organizations, or other individuals. It's great to have a champion who will help push along the development of an adaptation plan, and budget for the plan and its implementation. Our workbook that I've been referring to does list a number of worksheets and sort of checklists that can help guide you through the process. It's not mandatory. It's there to help you, and you can pick and choose what you'd like to incorporate into your plan at this level. Next slide, please. So now we're on to the first step of adaptation planning, which is to identify your potential adaptation options. Here, we're going to go through an example that we've talked about in the past, which was heat waves. And this worksheet is available in your workbook. So in heat waves, when you're trying to develop what are going to be your adaptation actions, you're going to look at your consequences. So here we have seniors and vulnerable community members suffer from heat stroke. What are some potential adaptation actions that you can take in your community to minimize the number of seniors and vulnerable populations that are going to suffer from heat stroke? Well, you can develop thresholds to help plan when heat wave responses will be required. Could ask communities for Health Canada about some existing systems. You can promote a buddy system where members can check on other family members, elderly and vulnerable family members, or extend the hours of community parks and splash pads. Another consequence from heat waves could be equipment failure from overheating. Your action could be as simple as scheduling regular maintenance of the equipment. Another consequence is, cancellation of outdoor events and sports gatherings. And so your action could be to, create some contingency plans, such as alternative indoor spaces. So this is kind of the actions to get you looking at what you could possibly be doing as options. Next slide, please. And as you're doing this, you also want to think about other strategies and plans that are out there. You don't want to have any conflicting actions in your plan with other plans that are on the landscape. And also, you want to align them. Aligning will produce better outcomes. Other plans can provide data and information that you can incorporate into your plan. Look for no regrets or low regret approaches. Use other strategies to complement your strategic planning process. Your plan is flexible and responsive and can be adjusted or changed as needed. And as you can see on this slide, we've just mentioned a few other strategies and plans that are out there. Canada's National Adaptation Strategy, the Water Management Strategy that we have here in Manitoba, and the National Climate Strategy for the Association of First Nations. Next slide, please. So the second step in our adaptation planning, as you can see here, is to evaluate the potential adaptation actions. You might have developed quite a long list of adaptation actions. So how are you going to prioritize them? So what you need to do is consider specific criteria for each of your actions. You're going to consider the financial resources of your community, your organizational capacity, the impacts on other stakeholders, what community support you have for this action, your technology, your expertise, and perhaps other criteria. And then you can rank your adaptation actions by priority. Next slide, please. So you can see here we have a table out of the workbook that's going to help you to evaluate your criteria for your adaptation actions. You're going to look at the effectiveness of this action. You can look at the affordability of this action, the feasibility of it occurring in your community, the acceptability. Is there going to be significant pushback from specific stakeholders or elected officials in your community? Is it equitable? Does it meet the needs of everyone in your community? And is it flexible? And with these criteria, you're able to assign levels of, very low, low to medium, medium to high, and very high. So this is a process that'll help you work through to prioritize some of the adaptation actions that you might have identified. Next slide, please. And again, here's an example using one of the worksheets out of the workbook where we have evaluated our adaptation option. The example we have here is using air conditioning community facilities as a cooling center. And this is going to address our impacted group, which is our seniors, vulnerable community members that suffer heat stroke. And you can evaluate each of those criteria with a number rating to let you know and to rank all your other climate and adaptation actions. So again, when you look here, we have our heat wave, we have our impacted group, we have our action as our cooling center, and of course we have our outcome, which is our consequences that we want to reduce the emergency room visits. And if you do this action, go through this exercise for each of your adaptation actions, it'll help you prioritize your actions for your plan. Next slide, please. And here we are now at the plan, preparing an adaptation plan. Here are some actions for drafting your adaptation plan. You want to look at your summary of your vulnerability and risk assessment that identified your climate hazards, your impacts, and your consequences, and to prioritize your climate risks. You're going to summarize your proposed climate actions, and you're going to identify potential timelines for implementation. Identify information you will need to implement these actions. You'll want to circulate a draft to stakeholders and people in your community. Get some feedback from people. And then produce a clear strategic plan for approval at your municipal council or your town council. Next slide, please. So what you're going to be doing is completing an adaptation action for each of your hazards that you've identified in your VRA. Then this worksheet is number 18 in your workbook you'll find, and it walks you through each of these steps. So again, for our example of heat waves, our climate hazard, we're going to look at our action, which is to use air-conditioned community buildings as cooling centers. We're going to identify a lead for this. We're going to identify support, timeline, costs, funding, indicators that's going to help us measure how successful this action was. We're going to do some prior planning. We're going to assign a department responsible for it and put some other notes. And you're going to want to complete a worksheet like this for each of your adaptation actions to have a complete plan in hand for your community. Next slide, please. So now we're moving on to the implementation of your adaptation action plan. And I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Ramon Salas, to walk you through stage 4 of implementation.
Thank you very much, Alex. My name is Ramon Salas. I'm Senior Policy Analyst with Climate Preparedness and Communications Branch. Over the next few minutes, I'll walk you through stage 4, implementation, and stage 5, monitoring, evaluation, and learning. So as shown on this slide, this climate adaptation planning process, we're now in stage 4. We'll see the blue arrow pointing to it. The purpose of this stage or adaptation implementation is to put in place adaptation actions that will help reduce your community's vulnerability to climate risks and increase your resilience to the impacts of a changing climate. So there are 3 tasks that need to be completed in this particular stage. The first is to get approval from decision makers, from your council or watershed authorities. Second, add your plan to municipal budgets and policies. That means you need to align your adaptation planning process with the regular municipal budgeting and policy making processes. And then third, find funds to pay for the work to implement those actions. So there are no associated worksheets for this stage. Next slide, please. Thank you. The following are the key considerations for implementation. First is to identify champions from within the council, community organizations, or individuals who will play a vital role in advancing the implementation of your adaptation plan. Second, build partnerships and collaboration with internal and external stakeholders in order to leverage critical resources, tools to advance the implementation of your plan. And then think big. Climate impacts know no boundaries. They transcend municipal boundaries. So you need to think big at the watershed or regional level. A regional approach works better, given that you'll be able to address shared climate risks, make efficient use of resources, and then achieve impactful outcomes. Use existing systems to consider climate action. There's no need to reinvent the wheel. So you need to build on existing ones, your system, and enhance. Develop procurement policies that prioritize products and services that are resilient to climate risks. This means that you need to take into account the supply chains, the value chains, and then the associated risks of those suppliers and products, services. Investing in resilient design and construction by incorporating climate risks and vulnerabilities can foster longevity of assets and also secure adequate budget to support adaptation initiatives. This includes innovative financial mechanisms, including catastrophe or green bonds, and also at the moment there's this funding. There are funding opportunities from Federation of Canadian Municipalities to be able to support the implementation of your adaptation plan. Next slide, please. So moving on to stage 5, monitoring, evaluation, and learning. So you can see that in the diagram. The purpose of this stage is to help you understand, inform, and enhance your climate change adaptation efforts. Start your measurement right from the beginning. So it's important to establish a baseline, a benchmark against which to measure your progress. Develop indicators by gathering to track your progress, evaluate the results, learn from experience, and then continuously challenge your assumptions to improve your adaptation actions. So this reflects the iterative nature of the adaptation planning process. Next slide, please. These are the elements of a monitoring, evaluation, and learning system. This shows worksheet 19. So this provides you the opportunity to outline your monitoring, evaluation, and learning system. And so as an example, here we have 5 elements of the MEL system. First, goals and objectives. So you have to list the specific goals and objectives of the adaptation plan identified in stage 1. Monitoring framework. So you have to describe what will be monitored, including indicators, data sources, methods, and timing. And then data collection methods. Describe the tools and techniques as you will use to collect the data. So that may involve primary and secondary data gathering. And then data analysis. Describe how you will analyze the data, including techniques and software you will use. So you may want to also include statistical analysis of your data. And then data management plan. List your procedures for data storage, organization, security, access, and sharing. So in summary, adaptation and resiliency measurement is a complex multi-factor area. So it's a multifaceted task. And it's not easy to count like a ton of carbon in the context of climate mitigation. there is no single indicator for it. Next slide, please. Here are different strategies to collect information. So here, in terms of data sources, we have interviews, surveys and questionnaires, focus groups, scorecards. So to illustrate, interviews may entail one-on-one conversations to gather qualitative data. So this can be done through interviews with key actors and experts, surveys and questionnaires, through the use of structured sets of questions to gather quantitative or qualitative data. And an example is online surveys or paper surveys, and then focus groups through small group discussions to gather qualitative insights. And then an example could be community focus groups and expert panels and scorecards. So it's a systematic criteria-based tool for evaluating the effectiveness of activities, projects, and entities. Examples are evaluation scorecards, performance metrics, qualitative and quantitative comparisons. Next slide, please. So just to mention that data is essential. In summary, data is essential to help you track your progress in or changes in your community's vulnerability, risks, adaptive capacity, and resilience. So it's really important to be able to track those changes, to be able to measure your progress in terms of achieving your ultimate goal of your adaptation plan. Thank you, and that ends my presentation. Yeah, Alex, I'll give it back to you.
Sure, thanks, Ramon. I'll jump in now. Sorry, could you go back to the last slide for me? I just wanted to mention a few things here. Thank you. So yes, as Ramon mentioned, you want to review and update your adaptation plan. Adaptation plan is an iterative process and a living document, and you should review your adaptation plan on a regular basis and align it with your existing planning, policies, and budgeting. Having an up-to-date adaptation plan and an updated vulnerability and risk assessment will help you when you're applying for funding for your adaptation actions, whether it's funding with the Federal Canadian Municipalities, FCM, or other funding options. Having these plans and having them up to date will really help your funding opportunities for your adaptation actions. And as Ramon mentioned, it is important to learn from your experience, your challenge and assumptions, and improve what you're doing in adaptation planning through your monitoring, evaluating, and learning. Next slide, please. So the key takeaways from this webinar, we hope you've learned that successful adaptation planning involves the engagement of all key stakeholders, including communities, government agencies, Indigenous, and business sector. Their input and cooperation are critical for developing and implementing an effective plan. Adaptation planning is not a one-time effort, but a continuous process, just like your vulnerability and risk assessment. It is important to regularly review your plan to understand your resiliency and keep it up to date. Monitoring, evaluation, and learning is important for building robust and adaptive response to a changing climate. The adaptation planning cycle is designed to help make your efforts effective, affordable, and sustainable. So if there's one thing you can take away from this webinar today, adaptation plans identify the actions to be pursued. It sets out a timeline for key steps and includes locally relevant information to build resilience for a safe, healthy, and prosperous Manitoba, and perhaps for your community as well. Great. Thank you.